On Iran, as a spokesperson for the Pentagon, you can't tell the American people whether the U.S. will take or support offensive action against sovereign nation that did not attack U.S. forces or U.S. interests in the region, which is Iran. Don't you need an authorization from Congress to be part of that?
So what I can tell you, Fadi, is what we've said from the very beginning is that we don't seek a wider regional war, and we definitely don't seek conflict with any country or group. That includes Iran. When it comes to an Israeli response, we're talking to them about their response. Of course, as you know, we have U.S. forces in the region. The Secretary's priority from day one has always been to protect our people and taking care of our people. A response or any type of, whether it's trades on the border, in the northern border, between Israel and Lebanon, or attacks on U.S. forces from Iran-backed militias, that has consequences on U.S. forces. And so when I tell you that we're in consultations and discussions with the Israelis on their response, that's what I mean.
Okay, and then on the Iranian response to the assassination of Haniya in Tehran, which is shooting 200 missiles. According to Israeli media, these missiles were targeting military infrastructure, and they hit 3 air bases, not civilian infrastructure. So is your assessment that the Iranians were after civilian infrastructure in Israel? And what precisely are you talking? Which civilian infrastructure are you talking about?
I said innocent civilians. And I just said infrastructure. I'd say broadly speaking, our assessment is that some of the ballistic missiles were targeting military infrastructure, but for a greater assessment, I'd refer you to the Israelis to speak to that. Ultimately, the intent and target of that missile, Iran would have to speak to, because they're the ones putting in the coordinates. We can only judge the trajectory and where they landed or where they were shot out of the sky.
Thank you for responses. You answered the question about your support for the so-called limited operation in southern Lebanon, which is to protect the Israeli, civilians on that border. And well, we know Hezbollah in their arsenal have missiles that can be launched from tens of kilometers away from the border. So how does that operation make any sense if the intended or effect or impact or goal is to prevent Hezbollah from launching those attacks?
Along that border and some of that infrastructure are C2 nodes and, storage facilities that the Israelis military, and understandably, feels the need to eliminate in order to get, their population back into the north. And this is not just for the protection of Israeli citizens. These are also, Lebanese citizens that live on the other side of the border to allow for, them to live in safety free from Hezbollah as well.
So the Israelis are trying to protect Lebanese civilians.
I think they are certainly trying. I'm not going to characterize, all of their operations, but they've been pretty clear that they want to see their people move back into the northern communities, and they are conducting limited operations along that borderline. Charlie.
Yes, Sabrina, we're all sort of referring to the same thing, and you had mentioned consequences. This is where conversations with Iran of what the Israelis may do with Iran is different than what they've done unannounced in places like Lebanon. Because just looking at the geography, you've got Israel, you've got Iran, you've got a U.S. footprint kind of between them. It will have consequences for U.S. forces. Has there been any change in terms of posture or readiness or alertness? Have you seen any activity by Iranian-backed militias? Have you seen the Houthis activating in any way?
So no change to our posture or readiness. I'll remind you that, as you said, we have forces throughout the region. Any type of action has potential impacts for our forces wherever they might be stationed. In terms of, Houthis or IMG groups in, Syria and Iraq, I think as of most recently, the Houthis have continued to target commercial ships in the Red Sea. We have seen from almost the beginning, I think since October 17th, sustained periods of attacks on U.S. forces from these groups in Iraq and Syria. But I don't have anything recent to point to you on, if that's what the question was. But we certainly have continued to see activity. we always reserve the right to defend ourselves, and that's what our forces will do in the region if attacked.
You haven't seen any uptick in that region?
I mean, could you give me something specific that you're referencing, or is there like a specific date? Because we saw a sustained period since October 17th.
When Iran launched the largest ballistic missile attack that Israel has ever seen, it didn't activate any of its proxies to perhaps take a poke at U.S. forces in the region at the same time.
Yeah, I don't have anything for you on that. I mean, if our forces are attacked, or if there is something in the vicinity that, could land on the base, our forces have the authority, like the ability to shoot it down, and they'll take the measures needed to protect themselves. But I don't have any, there was no, as far as I'm aware, there was not a coordinated attack that Iran launched its ballistic missile attack and then also coordinated with its proxy groups. I'm not tracking that there was a coordination there. Yeah.
Thank you, Sabrina. Due to the increasing tensions in Lebanon, you deployed new reinforcements to the region, mostly from the Air Force. Do you use the air bases in Cyprus for those? And you were monitoring the latest attack of Iran on Israel. And in your reconnaissance, when you found out the attack is starting, did you use the bases in Cyprus as well?
So I'm just not going to speak to our basing options and where our aircraft are located. Constantine.
Thanks, Sabrina. Following up on sort of Jen's line of questioning from earlier, so the destroyers, in helping to repel this attack, fired off 12 interceptor missiles. Granted, I'm sure these destroyers can get resupplied, but if this were a more prolonged conflict, does the Department of Defense feel confident in its supply chain to be able to provide more interceptor missiles in a longer-term conflict?
I think you've seen the Secretary make the commitment to, of course, always taking into account U.S. forces and the protection of U.S. forces, but also the commitment to defend Israel. When it comes to the supply chain, there's certainly the defense industrial base is certainly being pressure tested, and we saw that from Ukraine. So, we're still confident in our abilities. We're still confident that we'll be able to resupply. But I will point you to the fact that we've had delays in funding from Congress that haven't allowed us to backfill our shelves, which impact what can go out into our different AORs, and of course, that has an impact on the mission. Those are all things that the Secretary thinks about when he makes these decisions, and when carrier strike groups are moved, different squadrons are moved into the region. So to answer your question, we're going to do what we need to do, and we believe that we have the capabilities that we need to defend our forces. But when it comes to the defense industrial base, we've seen that from Ukraine, especially, that the base is catching up, and, we still have a backlog, and it doesn't help that also we're operating under a CR.
So just to sort of follow up on that.
Sure.
So is there any truth to sort of this criticism that any missile fired in defense of Israel or Central Command takes away from Admiral Paparo and the notion of defending against China in the Indo-Pacific?
No, I mean, every COCOM, there are different mission requirements. I think you have to also remember, as a planning organization, while we didn't see October 7th and that attack, what happened on October 7th was absolutely devastating, and, wasn't something that was built into the department's plans. We plan for a range of, crises all around the world, whether it be, Hurricane Helene, or, it doesn't, events all around the world. The department is able to surge resources and move capability at a rapid pace, which I think shows the, quite frankly, the power of the United States military. Of course, that's going to impact us down the line, but we're able to make those adjustments. And that's something that, the Secretary considers in every decision that he makes. And of course, with the consultation of the chairman and other departments in this building.